Good morning. Ish. Well, West Coast is still morning, so we're gonna stick to that. It's brunch here on the West Coast.
Oh, it's easy.
Yeah. And let's see, we've got Chris Plastic, hello.
Chris.
And the lovely, the amazing Rhea Black. Hello, welcome. And CJ.
Right.
Hello, CJ. The amazingly artistic CJ. If you guys are on Blue Sky, go find CJ. CJ occasionally shares original art. So at some point, I'm going to get my shit together. We're far enough in that I can say shit on stream. And get CJ to, I'm going to commission a coloring page from CJ. So I don't know what yet, but we'll figure it out. So anyway.
Hiya, CJ. Sorry, I see. Yeah, I see them all the time here in the chat, and I just keep saying titular heroine. So hi.
No. And with all of that, good morning, Rick. Welcome.
Sorry to interrupt you. Hi, Allison.
No, sorry.
Good to see you as always. Happy to color and be distracted from the world.
Yeah, the world is a little crazy right now. So we're gonna color Battle of the Planets because
because we want to join a science ninja team.
Yes,
and
it's true.
Fight for good is what we want to do.
So,
but we haven't.
No. Nobody. I have not gotten the call to adventure yet. But it'll happen. Like, it's gonna happen, you guys. I'm gonna wake up one day and somebody will come in and be like, "Here you go. Here's your sword. You were stolen as a baby princess from another kingdom, and you've been raised by the evil horde, and the horde infestation needs you to expel it."
Love it.
Any day now.
Waiting. Come on.
I'm waiting. Hello. Yeah. So anyhow, I'm of course going to start appropriately with Princess, which is not her name in the original, is it? That's an American thing, correct?
Yes. Yes. Sorry. So we're doing Battle of the Planets, which in the United States was the team. The characters were known as G-Force.
Yeah.
Because reasons. But in Japan, it was Gatchaman, or the Science Ninja Team, which is my reference earlier. And her original name was the Swan. June.
That's
the Swan.
correct. Jun.
Yes, June the Swan. I haven't actually decided what I'm coloring yet, but go for it.
Oh, no, it's fine. I'm starting with her because this is a pretty easy one so that I didn't get a chance to warm up. We have 4 kittens, and they are in the terror stage of kittendom. Like, literally, like, they were climbing curtains and swinging around earlier when I was trying to get ready.
That's not terror. They were enjoying life and trying to provide you a model, but you weren't listening.
They're trying. But the way it works out is either I have to 100% focus upon them and give them love, or they terrorize. So it's 100% like with my mother when I was a child. Pay attention to me or I will ruin your life. So
Wait, that was your mother or that was you to your mother?
That was my mother.
Okay.
Yeah. R.I.P. Mom.
Oh, moms.
Oh, moms. Anyway, so Battle of the Planets, aka G-Force. What is interesting was this was something I loved as a child in 1979 because obviously Star Wars. I didn't know until much later that it was not. I mean, I assumed it was Japanese not when I was 4. I had no clue what Japanese animation was, but I knew it wasn't typical American animation. It wasn't like Hanna-Barbera. So, and it also came in on the afternoons. So I come home from school and come home from kindergarten and watch G-Force, even though, because I couldn't remember Battle of the Planets. I just remembered G-Force.
It's funny that you say that because I often wonder I try to remember, like, where did we start calling it G-Force? Was it us doing it, or did they refer to it somehow? That I mean, they did in the show, but I always wondered, like when people were talking
Yeah.
about, oh, I watch G-Force versus I watch Gotcha Man, or I'm sorry,
Well, I
versus I
do.
watch Battle of the
Yeah.
Planets. I don't know
Right.
if like my neighborhood made that up, or me and my brother, or
I think it was
I don't know.
partly the advertising, and I do remember at one
Yeah.
point there was some sort of merch that said G-Force.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
that's all I was confused whenever I started looking for it as an adult, and it was branded Battle of the Planet. So I think
Mhm.
I think probably a lot of the because commercials for syndicated programming back there was not quite as sophisticated as it is now. They were just, and it was probably
Right.
just like
Usually done by the
join,
local station, right?
yeah, just your local station, and I'm sure it was just like join G-Force at 4:30 as a fight.
Yeah, I vaguely remember it something like yes. That's why
And I
I
think
was.
that's where
That's
it
why I
came
asked you.
from. And then it was probably
Hmm.
like Battle of the Planets 4:30. Well, it would have been 3:30
Hmm.
in Texas, but at the same time, so I think that's for me. That's where it came from, and that's what like I have this coloring book that I did the flip through of, and sent you some pages from. And one of these is a Japanese book that I found
That's
online.
so. I know we're all over the place, but I will say when I looked at the art the other day, I was actually down at my parents' house down in LA, and I opened up the folder. I'd seen it like when you first sent it, and
Hmm.
mainly the images on there were the U.S. Battle of the Planets one,
Yeah,
and then I started looking more closely to kind of decide what do I actually want to color. And by the way, if people are wondering why does he have so many pages and why is he doing this, I actually haven't decided yet. I'm kind of just flipping through trying to see. I have limited colors and I'm just trying to test stuff out. But most of these, I started going through the US version, and these two actually are from the US Battle of the Planets coloring book that you
yeah,
had on the main sort of
yeah.
drive.
Some of them, yeah.
And so that was like, here's the Phoenix, here's what they call Galactor,
Uh,
like the head. But
yeah,
then the Japanese stuff I found, I was like, holy
yeah,
crap. Because the art was redone. Like, and
yeah.
these are fairly good, but
Well,
there's something about.
it's Whitman, like Whitman, who
Mhm.
later became like Golden Books. This was right around. Oh, we lost shirt. Oh, there it is. All right,
What'd you
cool.
lose?
There we go.
Oh, and now it's really loud out there.
We lost shirt. Yeah, there we go. There we go. I got you back.
Hold
So
on, let
really
me
quick.
double check on something. It's really loud over there.
Okay, no problem. So while you're doing that, according to Chris Plastic, there was another adoption called G-Force. So that is probably the two of them. Hello, cute cult. All right, I'm gonna quickly. I'm whistling today because I'm old. Good morning, Thanos Copter.
Hey,
Uh,
Thanos.
so according to Chris Plastic, there was later an adaptation called G-Force Guardians of Space. So
Guardians of Space.
I would have gotten Battle of the Planets based on 1979 when I was watching it originally, but later it apparently was rebranded, which would make sense. All right, and then Cute Cult has June pre-ordered. Excellent. And hello, Cute Cult.
Storm Collectibles. I'm so torn on that. Who was that? Cute Cult, was it?
Cute Cult, yeah.
Cute Cult. I am so torn on that because I love Gotcha Man. And when they announced Mark or the Eagle, Ken, whatever they call him,
Okay.
I was excited. Then I started seeing reviews and looked a little closer, and I wasn't super sold on it. But the June one looks fantastic. I don't know if I'm going to go back. And the problem with Storm, one of the issues that I have with Storm Collectibles is definitely price. So it's like almost like $100. So it's like
All right.
$500 for the team.
Yeah.
And then Storm tends to take a long time before finishing teams, and that could be. So I don't know. I'm deeply disappointed in myself for not simply going like, oh, I want to buy Gotcha Man figures and I'll take those. But
Yeah, and
that's
there
where I'm at.
really quick, there was a robot inserted into the American version, and I have a page of Zzark 7. I just
Seven Zark 7, I think, is what he
yeah,
was.
7, something like that.
Delete
But
him,
that
toss him.
Well, and that was the other thing. Like whenever I tried a
I was
few
not a
years ago
fan.
to go and rewatch it, I
Hmm.
couldn't find it. I could find Japanese episodes
Hmm.
that weren't subtitled, so I was like, well, this is not helpful because I don't. Surprisingly, I don't speak Japanese. Um, because where I grew up, it was like French or German. And I took German, which seems apropos based on certain things as of late. Um, anyway,
I
so
know it's
yeah,
hard not
so
to mention
so I was
anime.
very disappointed because I was like, I'll rewatch, and then I found somebody who was doing a torrent that allegedly had VHS rips of the originals. Because my goal was I'll watch the original sort of American version, which will sort of
Hmm.
help give me a context to it again because I remembered the characters and little else because 78 I got a pretty good memory but it ain't that good.
I
I
was two.
remember the coloring book more than I remember the actual, other than there was one where I think Keith goes undercover and pretends to be Zoltar. I think I could be wrong. I just remember there was an episode where he was Zoltar. And anyway, so so I was just because I was like, well, let me rewatch it, and then I believe it was Dan Larson's Secret Galaxy because if you're curious about it, he's probably got an episode. Um, and he sort of broke it down about sort of it was brought over from Japan, but because of all the licensing rights, there's probably no way to easily watch the Battle of the Planets that we grew up with. And I was just at that point, I'm like, this is so much work, and yeah. And I kind of gave up for a little bit. I'm gonna try to
I
take some.
do think it has gotten a little easier. I've tried to look, and but that said, uh, yeah, I know. I feel like
I
I want to rewind a little bit. So I think
oh yeah,
the show in Japan, Science Ninja Team Gotcha Man, started like early 70s, either 72, 74. If I remember, I looked it up the other day.
yeah,
But so then I wasn't born till 76 and didn't see it till maybe at earliest 78, like you said, as a 2-year-old. But then it was kind of just ever present through my early years, so to like 4 to 6. And I just remember G-Force, and just being, and that was the American version that I was exposed to.
yeah,
And I totally remember the robot and was annoyed by him. Like I, even at my young age, could sort of tell, like, dude, the animation looked different. And then all of a
yeah,
sudden they had like, Princess coming in to talk to him, and she just pose and stand there, and it was weird. And it was
yeah.
like
It
Casey
was.
Kasem's voice for, is it Mark now?
I
The main
think
dude?
Mark. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was weird, but still, it was like I went with it because then they show the animation when they're fighting. So this is now the Japanese stuff, and you can
Mm-hmm.
totally tell because of the line work. It's just got a lot more, like there's different
Yeah.
line weights compared to what's going on with, what did you say the name of the company was before they became Golden?
Whitman.
Whitman.
Yeah, the coloring
That
book.
this tend to be real clean. It's funny when I look at this, it totally looks very Hanna-Barbera, like very static poses.
Yes.
And then we get into here, and there's just a little bit more detail lines around muscles and the fabric, and this sort of dynamic, kind of typical manga anime of just
Yeah.
like energy lines. And damn, I just love this art. He was my favorite, even though I got annoyed with him. Joe, or God, what was his name?
Mark and Keith, and then there
Was it
was
Keith?
I think Keith. Yeah, and then
Okay.
Tiny was the bigger guy,
Yes. So
and
there's
then
Princess, June, and then Tiny, and I forget his name in
Sorp.
Japan.
Was it Sorp? The little
Maybe.
runty guy.
And then, oh yeah, Kiop in the US.
Yeah, that's right. I
And
don't
this
know
is
why I wanted.
totally yeah, but I don't know. I love the Japanese stuff. I think this was from this is the Japanese comic book. Or
Yeah.
sorry, coloring book. I don't know. There's just something about like the angles, like this curve that's going on, that there's just a lot more dynamic. And I could tell watching it that there was sometimes these shifts in the comic
Mm-hmm.
that in the cartoon. Then years later, I think I was probably like high school, 14 or so. I don't remember how I'd seen some of the stills from the Japanese show, and it was like, oh, it's Gotcha Man. I was like, oh crap, that was that
Right.
G-Force Battle of the Planet stuff. And then in college, I tried my best to source some and got to see it then, and then later when like news groups and stuff. And so I have somewhere on a hard drive all of them, but like
Interesting.
like MP4s or whatever. And
I have a program
what am
called
I going to
Cast where
color?
you can share sort of like a computer, your desktop or whatever you're watching.
Okay.
So let's chat because I want to start. I'm gonna at some point toward the end of the year, I'm gonna launch memberships on the channel because
Okay.
I've gotten enough people asking me how they can support the channel.
Yeah.
Which is a nice feeling when people actually ask and you're not launching it like, come support me. When people start asking you, that's usually a good sign that you should do something. So I'm going to do memberships. But schedule wise, it's really hard to fit in extra live streams or whatever, or extra free videos.
Yeah.
So, the typical like member early releases and what have you. But I also, because I have cast, I'm like, I could do watch parties. Where whatever I'm watching, I can share. We can all sort of sit in the chat, and
Just
other
hang out.
than me paying for the program, which I pay for it so that I can use it for certain work stuff. Anyway, so I think I'm gonna and Battle of the Planets, Gotcha, whichever version it is, would be a fun thing to watch an episode or two of. And because it's
Yeah.
basically streaming from my laptop, I don't have to worry about sort of copyright violations or whatever, because it's not like actually broadcasting to the entire internet. And nobody else has to have anything other than free logins. So anyway, that's a
Sounds like a plan. I would
but I'll
be
get
happy
with
to.
you because that would be fun
Yeah.
to watch.
Well, I think I've landed on the Condor, the Joe Keith. Is that what it was?
Yeah, I
God,
believe I'm pretty sure it's Keith. Yeah.
Let me Google it. Yes. Not because I don't trust you, but so that I can reference
it's all right because
thing.
it's also really easy to mix up American G-Force with American Voltron from the 80s because they use a lot of the same names. They use very generic American 80s names, because it's easier. Not like they were trying to line up the lips or anything. All right, there we go.
I'm looking at the wiki for the Battle of the Planets. I just remember Casey Kasem because man, he was everywhere, right? I mean, obviously he was like America Top 40 or whatever that was, and then it was like
Robin.
And I remember him on who was he in Transformers? The Little Red. I think he was a Little Red.
I'm not a Transformers enough person to know that.
Oh, that's fine. But it's just interesting to me with this property in particular. I love this property. It's like totally ugly word, seminal. Is the root word semen? Yeah. Well, anyways, foundational, I guess, or highly influential. Speaking of,
sorry, Clip. And then hello, Cassie Kitchen, and in line with that, though, Casey Kasem really did get around back then. So
yes, he did. But just the show Gotcha Man, like that, the whole Science Ninja team was like, my understanding was that was like the first blueprint for a lot of the team dynamics and teams in general that we would get in Japanese cartoons. So like Voltron, if you look at like the makeup of the team, there's there's the leader who is like a little bit of a do-gooder, a little bit of a Leonardo, if you will.
Yeah.
Speaking Ninja Turtles. And then you had Joe the Condor or Keith, kind of the rebellious. So there's the leader. But, as far as like build and physicality, they're similar. One is just Cyclops and the other's Wolverine, if you will. The sort of rebel edge. Sure.
And the other
has edginess. one has the big open manga, like windows to the soul, signifying he's like good. And then the other's a little bit more squinty because he's a little bit more on the gray side. And you don't know, is he good? Is he bad sometimes? What's his deal? But, sometimes you need that edge on the good guy team to kind of win
He's
out
the
and
one.
do the
He's
things
the
that
one
others
who
won't do.
always starts not to play devil's advocate, but maybe the
Sure.
giant monsters aren't always the bad guy.
Right, a little bit of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And then we've got Princess June, who is the one woman allowed to be on the Science Ninja team or on the team, right? So
Right.
again, if you're using the Voltron analogy, oh my God, those names. It's Keith. Oh, God, I'm not even going to try. Lance,
Keith,
maybe.
Lance, Allura.
Allura. Here's your Allura.
And
Then
Hulk.
you've
I think it's
Tiny.
Hulk or Hunk.
Yeah. You've got the larger guy, Hunk, right? I think it was Hunk.
Yeah.
And then you've got the little kid, right? Who's like the and it's funny how this little kid in particular in the United States, he was Kiop. He would like every now and then do this weird like tick thing. And it always reminded me of like Silverhawks, right? They're eagles, same kind of bird thing. And then you had sort of like that archetype hero. They switched it up a little and they had like a big football twin brother and sister being like these two.
Yeah.
Then you had, instead of the, you had the little, what was his name? Hopper Kid.
Yeah.
Did they have a rebel? No, they only had 4 and then the cowboy pilot, right?
And then they had a black guy because it was the 80s. So now you needed a black guy.
The black guy came later, though. He wasn't introduced from the beginning.
He wasn't introduced in the figures originally, but he was in the cartoon and the merch from the beginning.
But he was in the cartoon. He wasn't a part of that original group. He didn't even.
Well,
he wasn't. He didn't
like the pilot movie, but he came in way before the toys. He's in all of
later
the
we got
books I have.
Right. Like he didn't even have it. He wasn't a part of the actual team that got to sit on that little ship. Anyway, and then there's a ship, right? So all of that stuff to say, Gotcha Man really set that mold that we see later in Super Sentai or like Go Ranger, what becomes Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, like all of that stuff. We even saw it sort of like later expanded. I think in Voltus 5 was the same thing with 5 people, different archetypes, the leader, the rebel, the girl, the kid, the big guy. And then from there, it kind of expands. But this ish right here was the root. And I loved it because it was so fleshed out, not just that part, but also that they were like teenagers. So it was a little bit of that Peter Parker Marvel Comics, like, oh, maybe I could be them kind of a vibe going on. And then they were ninjas, not just ninjas though, like high tech science ninjas.
Right.
I mean, come on, that was the jam. So I loved me some G-Force Gotcha Man, and of course, like the G-Force Gotcha Man dynamic of like say Voltron and Go Lion, which was the original Japan version. Like one was definitely for Japanese audience, so they weren't shy about hiding things like, I don't know, death, grief, loss, violence, complex emotions, sort of. But then in the US, it was like, no, the good guys always win, the villain's losing, and don't worry about what the villain's actually trying to do, just know that they're bad. And so there was that, just like Voltron kind of got worked through the American filter and simplified a little bit, so did Gotcha Man to G-Force. So I just find it kind of interesting to see those larger patterns. And as I started to learn about that stuff, it helped me kind of not just understand my nerddom, but like the world in general.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, with Power Rangers, like, was Yellow Ranger always another woman, or was that an American thing?
I'm not sure. I think the original in I don't know. I'm not a big Sentai.
Okay.
Like Sentai, I followed for aesthetics, honestly. Like Super Sentai influenced me in the sense that like my brother, my family and I would go to LA, Little Tokyo. We'd go to this one toy shop and a couple of bookstores, and we would just see this stuff and have no context for what they were. They just looked cool. And I remember seeing Super Sentai, the whole idea of like 5 colors and different heroes. And I was thinking like, oh, reminds me of G-Force. and later, it was kind of just became these things. So I didn't understand who the characters were. I'd
Right.
watch it later, but I didn't watch like every single episode of that tokusatsu show. So I don't know. All that to say. And I'm bummed I don't have the
For
right
Power
course.
Rangers, like for me, I was always confused because I used to watch Night Flight, and they had segments of the original Japanese.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
One of the Power Rangers. I don't know. I said that one time, and somebody was like, "It's not the same." I'm like, "It's
Oh
literally
yeah,
like
because they
5
adapted different
people."
ones.
Yeah, it was just a different version. It's like, bitch, it's Power Rangers. Stop being a bitch. Like
Well,
Saban brought something over that was already here accessible if you were watching Night Flight. Like it may be a different version of that show, but it's the concept. Like the big ridiculous cheesy monsters, like 5 people in colored costumes. Like, come on, stop being that nerd. It's just not the same. It's like it's the concept. It was a show that was spun off of that show that came over here. Stop it, Carl. But
well,
I
that I
will
was
say
just
that
say,
with her,
you mentioned what's his name, Saban. In this
yeah,
case, for Gotcha Man, it was Sandy Frank. I remember seeing that
yeah,
name in the
Sandy Frank
beginning and
did a
like, who's
lot
that
of
person? Who's
stuff.
that person? Yeah, and I'd later learn that Sandy Frank did quite a bit in Hollywood and bringing stuff over and creating stuff,
Well, and it's like, yeah,
quote
again,
unquote
like,
creating.
not to sort of, well, we can sort of smack talk Saban about how poorly the actors were paid, how little respect the creatives got, and that, and him trying to keep that dirt cheap. But I will
Mm-hmm.
say, as far as, like, there was no other way in 1978, anyway, that we were going to get Japanese anime to American audiences
Sure.
without it getting Americanized. Um,
Yeah, not in a
so,
broad sense at all.
yeah. So, like, while in today's day and age, like, just bring the real shit over here, dub it really well, we're good. Um, I don't sort of, there are a few people who were like, it's just a crime. It's like American audiences wanted to be exposed to it without sort of the Sandy Frank and the Sabans of it, so that when we did get the World Wide Web easily accessible, we could start searching out the real stuff. Like I remember my good friend and roommate in the late 90s, early 2000s in Austin, she had all of the Sailor Moon seasons.
Ooh, yeah.
And it was she bought them, they were bootlegs because there was an American version, but it was sort of Sabaned up. Like the two lesbian Sailor Scouts were just friends in the American version. And Susan had managed to get somebody in Canada who had imported the original Japanese versions, dub did subtitles and dubs, somehow paid for voice acting to get so Susan had both. She had it dubbed and subtitled properly, where it was an actual, even if it didn't necessarily translate properly. They didn't try to Americanize what they were saying for the most part. So for me, that was like sort of this thing where I remember seeing Sailor Moon and thinking, this is kind of dumb. Because it was the American version, but then watching it as the Japanese property with either dubbing that was literal, like trying to literally translate it to an American audience, or the subtitles, I was like, okay, this is a different experience now.
Mm-hmm.
It's still cheesy as hell, but it's a fun cheesy because you're sort of getting the humor of the culture, and Sailor Moon is obviously as originally intended, probably for a slightly different audience than white American people in Austin, Texas, in the late '90s, early 2000s. But we could appreciate it, and then also how sort of for me to sort of get a vibe of like what Japan was making for like certain audiences at certain times. So I don't know, like
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish somebody would figure out how to get a Gotcha Man over here. And you're like,
it's around now. It's available. It's, you know, of course, like I don't know what the exact channels are, but
yeah,
I've had bits of it over time, and I don't know. I don't necessarily think that it's hard to find in terms of like actual releases. I think for me it was just that I didn't have the money to properly acquire
yeah.
it, other than to illegally or gray area, no, illegally, straight up, like, you know, download it. And so it's
All right,
out there, and I know people have had it.
all right. Really quick, I'm going to jump it because we've got people correcting us. If
Yes. Yeah.
you're confused by this, you guys need to remember this is how it works with Brick and I. We're going to forget you're here. Quip and Stanley's Toy Channel both let us know that Yellow Ranger was originally a dude.
It's a dude. Okay.
And that's why the pink has a skirt, but yellow does not. Thanks, America, back when we were progressive. And hello, Pod Racing Palpatine. Lovely to see you today. And hello, Sight Boy on Sight. Welcome.
Give
Lovely
me
to see
sight
you.
beyond sight.
And really quick, Chris
Oh,
Plastic,
God.
my argument for Power Rangers as a kid was that it was Voltron but live action. Fair. Quip, Allison starting a new Mighty Morphin Power Rangers podcast called It's Power Rangers, Stop Being a Bitch. Fair. I could do that. Every episode, I would just let people rant for 30 minutes and be like, it's Power Rangers, stop being a bitch. Next week, join me and my guest. Anyway, and Chris Plastic had a big crush on Sailor Mercury. You know, I can buy that. That makes sense. Green was Quip's favorite color, so Jupiter was his jam. I've got some Sailor Moon shorts coming up. It's exciting.
I'm sure there's a through line. I don't know what sorry, on Sailor Moon, but I'm sure there's got to be some kind of through line with, and I don't know which came first or whatever, but just this notion of like you have a scheme. Like in this case, it was birds, and there were different people in different teams, and they represent different ones. And then sort of like in Sailor Moon, it's like, well, you've got the planets, or with Seiya, it's like, you know, the zodiac or whatever. And then I don't know, there's something about that seems to be pretty common in Japanese pop culture. I don't know sort of if anybody's ever done any sort of scholarship on it
as much in America, even in comics. Every so often you'll get like a villain team in American comics, more so in the 60s, 70s and 80s, where it was like Team Zodiac, where they all, but they would last only an episode or an issue,
a couple issues. And they were always villains. You're right. There was never,
you would get like the elemental villains, and it was like Earth, Fire, Water. And sometimes, you know, one of those villains would come back later. But
what do you think that is? Is that like too orderly and organized for the American sense of like individualism? So it's like, no, we wouldn't be on a team like that. I'll be the Zodiac and you be something completely different. You know, I don't know.
Partly that, but I also, my other, as far as American superheroes, because that's sort of my reference.
I mean, later we get Silverhawks, right? But I think like in G.I. Joe, I always wonder about that, because as a kid, that first wave, I was super intrigued by the fact that, you know, they're all kind of soldiers. But then you had Scarlet, who stood out in her costume, and you had at Snake Eyes, and just that little bit of difference. But generally speaking, we're all soldiers. We all wear olive and with elements. Flash has a little bit of red. There was something to that to me was like, ooh, team with like clearly some individual specialists. Versus in the future, it was like Duke looked completely different from Flint, and, you know, like they were kind of uniformy. And then you got people like Sci-Fi and Barbecue. And so there was like a mishmash of everybody coming with their own costume, and like, you're sort of a team.
I think for toy lines, it comes down to sort of like, you have to sell a bunch of action figures. And what I will say is, even though that first wave of G.I. Joe, as a kid, Scarlet obviously was the one I was like, I want Scarlet. And my brother got Snake Eyes, and he had like one of the random, I think it was Clutch, maybe the one that had like a beard.
Clutch drove, it was in a vehicle. So
yeah, and well, he had like the little motorcycle and a figure to go with it from like wave one. That was like Christmas for him, 82. It was like Snake Eyes, the little motorcycle with the like attachment, and like a guy, either the
Love
guy
that.
that came with it or a guy to go with it.
The big
And
old machine gun attachment. Thank you
yeah,
very
that
much.
one,
Yes.
which worked really well with Scarlet. So
Feel free to tell me it's GI Joe, bitch, if I
yeah.
get too pedantic.
Oh no, it's fine. Um, but I remember seeing them on store shelves as a kid, and everyone was like, "Oh, they have this extra posability." I remember it being a big deal when the swivel arm, there were commercials like
Swivel
swivel
arm battle group.
But I just remember thinking Wave One GI Joe was boring because everyone looked alike. It was all dudes in green, and there was a black guy, and there was an all black guy, and then there was
Yeah, so
Scarlet.
yeah, I think you're speaking to a little bit to that, the idea that it's boring if it's all the same.
And I think in comic books, what happens is like
That
most
was different.
superhero teams in comics, like Justice League started with basically DC kind of like, well, we should have a team book. Marvel is doing team books. And well, let's put all of our main character, like our sort of C-listers on this team with some A-listers so we can maybe get get more people reading these books that are starting
Sell
to
those
not
other
sell
books.
so well.
Yeah.
As advertising. So I think, and then, the Teen Titans started sort of like as a teenage Justice League. You did, like in the 60s, DC did have like the Secret Six, which was, like six sort of adventurers who would come together at behest of Mockingbird to like solve crimes. And they're all sort of being blackmailed to work together. So they had that together, and they all sort of wore the same uniform. You had like the Doom Patrol, which were all these people who had been sort of were sort of freaks of nature. But what I think started happening was, Doom Patrol is well loved, but it was not a big selling book for a long time, which is why it was eventually canceled. Justice League did better when it was sort of this random collection of heroes, but then you would get a new writer and they would bring in new characters. So I don't think the cohesion of, say, a G-Force or a Power Rangers is possible in most American comic books because it's sort of the pastiche of it, where you've got different writers coming on the book, adding in new characters.
Yeah, let's think about that psychologically for a second, though, because you said it, they were villains, right? And it's the same in this, in a way, like where you've got the nameless troops who all look the same, right? That get slaughtered, basically, or stormtroopers, right? Versus Luke Skywalker in white and Han Solo and his gear, whatever. And then you've got these rugged individual, a conglomerate of a united group, if you will, but each with its own identity. God, now I'm thinking like states' rights, but yes, but they're united, right? And then the villains all look the same. They are conformity. They are, and I can kind of see the sort of American psychology of that. I also hear a little bit from you, this notion of, oh, that's boring. To a certain sensibility. To me, there is something about like a team, though. So I think Fantastic Four. I think the original X-Men. Give me the black and gold, or the blue and gold, depending on the artist or print tech. But it's like, I loved that. I loved when the New Mutants came out and all the kids were wearing that classic uniform. And I don't know, and of course, if you were unclear, I never joined the military. I never became a police officer, so I could wear a uniform. So I was never so into it that I wanted to necessarily like do that for the rest of my life. I was a Catholic school kid and had to wear the same brown corduroys and white polo shirt or button up and green. So like there was a little bit of that, I guess, uniform. And I will say, generally speaking, if you know me and have spent time with me in real life long enough, you start to realize that there is kind of a level of uniformity and predictability about my clothes. But I don't know. I was really into that notion, like, oh, they're visually, I get it. They're a team and they're working together, whether it's a science ninja team or the Ninja Turtles. You know, like
Right.
God, when that came out, they literally were all the same. They were
Yeah.
actually black and white, and then green and red on the covers. And then there was a sensibility of like, I guess, hey, let's bring it to kids in cartoon. One's got to be blue. One's got to be like.
Well,
I guess again, there's that need for individuality or whatever.
yeah,
Sorry.
my understanding though of Turtles is the colors were because they wanted to sell action figures, and the only way to sell 4 different turtles was to have 4 different colors.
But
So,
why? Because it would. That's because ultimately that's what the audience would understand.
well, no, I think also
Colors really
that.
wouldn't matter.
Well, I think also the parents. Like, how many stormtroopers did you get as a kid?
Stupid parents.
You already
Oh,
have
so they
that one.
so they would go, yeah, you already have that one. But then this one has sai, and this one has nunchaku, and this one has a katana and a bow staff. But yeah, no, I get it. Stupid parents.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a big part of it. Like,
You're right. You're right. I see that.
yeah, even Kenner, the vintage Star Wars, it's like we got 2 Bespin guards. Like, but otherwise there weren't any. We didn't get like, we got a Hoth Rebel, and we got a indoor Rebel, but we didn't get like 3 indoor. I mean, obviously Power of the Force started mixing it up, and beyond, where you would get multiple,
Sure.
modern toy lines, but
Mhm.
vintage toy lines, it was all about like and this is where sort of the adult collector, I think, is a benefit to toy lines is you're gonna get, you know 4
More
different
variety.
people in the same
Mhm.
uniform as an
Sure.
army builder or to fill out your scenes or whatever. I mean, they're
Yeah.
still selling the same. I mean, I just bought a New Hope Luke from the vintage collection. It'll be here in a few days. Uh, like, but I'm still buying, a New Hope versions of Luke and Leia and Han and Chewbacca. I mean, like, it's ridiculous to buy any Chewbacca in the vintage collection because it's basically the same figure over and over. But it's just,
Okay. I hear you.
like, so I think from and I think that's a lot of what with GI Joe. That's definitely what happened. Like after that first wave, you start seeing variants in the heroes because it's gonna stand out more. It's gonna pop on the shelf to kids. And I think because we're those kids, Gen X and older millennials, like we're those kids. So like for us, we need that pop. Like we've been marketed to in such a way where we, like, and it was again to convince our parents to buy us because as kids, when they do collect us all, we didn't care. I mean, I cared. I thought they were boring. But like my brother didn't care that every one of his GI Joes looked the same. He wanted them all. He just didn't get them.
Yeah,
You know?
that's funny.
But I think because of parents, like marketing had to be where it's all different. There's new stuff all the time. I think a big part of the reason, I mean, there's obviously the argument, well, they were making the money, so of course they're going to release 30 new figures every year once, when G.I. Joe was at its height. But I also think some of that is if there are 30 new figures on the shelf at all times, kids are sort of overwhelmed, but it's also going to get them back in the store next week so that they can get more, and it's funny. People are like, when we were kids, R5D4 was a peg warmer. I'm like, what fucking, there's my first F-bomb. But like, what store were you going to where any Star Wars figure between 1978 to 1979 and like
Was a
peg
peg warmer.
warmer? If it was on the Star
The
Wars
store
card,
of their mind, their faulty, fragile
there was
memory.
nothing peg warmer. I mean, I remember my first figure I bought in a store. Well, my parents bought for me was the Death Squad Commander because that was all that was left. And like Death Squad Commander Jawa and Tusken Raider were the last 3 figures released from the first 12. So those were my first 3 figures because those were the first ones that hit the shelves long enough. And Kenner took forever sending me my early bird figures. Thanks, Kenner. People bought them in the stores before I got my Leia. I hate you, Kenner. Anyway, I don't. I'm joking. But at the same time, like that's. But we kept going back even though I kept getting like the old white guy and like a sand nomad person that Anakin slaughtered in wholesale, and the Padme was just shrugging like, oh well, I'll marry you anyway. I love you. Space trailer park with that one. Anyway,
well, I loved the Gotcha Man uniforms, but even then they weren't like the GI Joes in that they were the original GI Joes. Sorry,
right.
They were a little bit more like the later GI Joes in that they were different birds, different colors. Like I'm doing Joe the Condor, and he had black and browns as sort of on the body with a blue cape. Mark had was all white and red. Princess was white and pink.
Even in the coloring book, because of the differences in the mask and the differences in the uniform, I can tell which is which. Like,
yes.
And so, I mean, like, there's definitely a reason for it to sort of all be unique, but at the same time, it's cool to have consistency, I think, and to have sort of a vibe where it's like everything
brand identity
a little different. Yeah, brand identity is super important because when you're punching a criminal in the face and defending the planet from like the evil forces, they need to know that you're you.
Yep.
And they're not.
I gotta know who's punching me.
Right. They're not gonna know if Aquaman is orange and green, and Batman is dressed like a bat. And Martian Manhunter is green and in underwear and a sex harness. Like, they're just not gonna know.
Oh, John Jones.
Oh yeah, poor John.
John's got a Jones. But anyway, uniforms I dig. I think these guys are cool. I loved all the team dynamics that we kind of talked about. There's differences, and everyone had a specialty. One was more techie and all of that kind of stuff.
Princess was the girl. I'm the girl, guys.
And she was the glue that often held them together, kept the boys, the two particular leads in particular, from fighting and all that shiz. But like, and then on top of that, the vehicles, right? The Phoenix. Oh, this is the other thing. They had like, the dope spaceship jet, whatever thing that would like detach and like would have their own individual sort of like vehicle underneath, right? Like they each kind of had their own little piece that would launch out, like a tank and a little jet and all of that, kind of like multiple vehicles combining into one energy that like obviously becomes pretty important in our later pop culture, whether it's in Diaclone or that Transformers, etc., or GoBots, I suppose.
And the ship turned into a like giant flaming phoenix that didn't destroy the entire galaxy because men think women can't handle immense superpowers.
Yes. Okay.
Anyway,
I love that. I love we're jumping Claremont. We're all over the place.
Claremont, Burn.
I love your brain.
All that's missing is a random reference to Charo. We'll get there.
Charo. Oh my god.
We'll get to Charo's because it's the 70s. You can't have
Gucci.
Yeah, you can't have the 70s without Charo. She was everywhere.
Gucci.
Oh. The Island, The Love Boat, The Tonight Show,
sitcom. I haven't thought of Charo in way too long.
She is on Instagram. Go look up Charo on Instagram.
Oh no, she's not.
I promise you.
Oh my god, how does she look in these days? Like, what is she in her 80s?
I mean, Yeah, she's
I don't
so
necessarily mean pretty or not. I just mean like, what does she look like as an old person? Sorry,
she
to be
looks
clear.
like Char. Like she's recognizable. I mean, I'm gonna assume she's had some lifts and some tucks and
Mm-hmm.
some collagen or what have you, because she doesn't look like an old salamander like Yoda did. But thank God Yoda didn't get into the horrible world of fillers on Dagobah. And you know there is botulism there because look at that planet. Anyway, she looks really
Love
good.
it.
I mean, she looks really good. If she's had work, it's been flattering. It's not like, science experiment gone wrong where you look like Jigsaw from the
It's
Jigsaw
not.
puppet
It's not
from
the
Saw.
MAGA
Like,
makeover.
yeah, it's not like Laura Loomer where you look like literally you're gonna roll up on a tricycle and be like, "Wanna play a game?" Um,
Oh, good
so
times. Good
whatever
times.
she's done has been subtle and it's been attractive, and flattering. I mean, like I'm not against if you feel I of all people am not against if you need to do a little enhancement or a little upgrade, do it. But if it goes poorly for you and it looks bad, you might get a little laughed at, and that's part of your journey. Sometimes that's part of the journey, folks.
Agreed.
I can't stop reality for you. I wish I could, baby. If I could stop reality, I would.
Ooh, transparency in I forgot. You and I were coloring something else where I had to kind of mimic transparency,
Yeah,
like this glass on top. Do you have a strategy?
I
I'm just,
do. So I
tell me,
color
teach me.
everything under the transparency lightly,
Okay.
like very light, and then I go over it with whatever color my transparency is. Lightly. I'm almost to Princess's face.
Okay.
So I will do a demonstration. I'll probably screw it up, but I'll even go solo for it. We'll do an actual
Ooh.
tutorial today, you guys. Come with me while I'm practicing the influencer voice because I want to do a few salty shorts where come with me while we color this old coloring book. And I don't know why all influencers talk in that voice. I've been trying to figure out what, some of them it's not as obnoxious, but a lot of them it's just like, come with me while we go to this restaurant for this culture I don't understand. And oh my God, it's so weird. Oh my God, yuck.
What's fun is seeing how that translates in other countries. So I don't think I've told you this, but or maybe I did in the chat, the Clubhouse chat, but we're going back to Japan next Sunday. We were there last year. Yes, we found some good deals, but we've been watching a lot of different coverage and stuff, and there is sort of a Japanese influencer voice. There's a Belgian influencer voice that we've kind of discovered. There's like different ones, and it's funny to hear that voice that you're doing sort of translated internationally.
Right.
There's a global influencer.
Right. This is not so good.
Oh no. Let's call that the Belgian one.
Yeah, that's the Belgian one. But
I don't think I I needed your tutorial, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Moving on with this guy.
Oh, for the transparency, cool.
Yeah, it looks more like shadows. I want to do some weird highlights of weird colors and just call it a day.
It's okay, Brooke. You'll be an artist one day. One day.
We'll make an artist of
one
you.
day you'll be an artist.
We'll make an artist of you someday.
You'll be an artist for real, and you can put your art degree to like actual work.
Make a man.
In real things.
Oh, art degree. I feel like I didn't get anything. Part of the LA trip, so random, and here's a connection to Muriel. Part of the LA trip on the way home from Pasadena was to stop by, visit friends in Oxnard, and then actually bring our kids, to see where mom and dad went to college, UCSB, where we met actually, and where Muriel went. Correct? Am I saying that right? Is it Muriel with a U or Muriel?
With a U.
With a U. And I was definitely in that mode of reminiscing about art school and because I got 2 degrees, art studio and communication. But it's funny you say that because it was never like I've never been in a single class in UCSB's art studio program where they were like, this is how you draw or this is how you color. It was more, it's a research institution, so it was a lot more theory, postmodernism versus this, or deconstruction. And so I don't feel like I got a whole lot of technique, and more just practice while thinking big ideas, which probably it was better for me anyways, because that's kind of how my brain tended to go.
I would have probably done more art classes in college and probably stayed in college longer if my teacher had been like that. And instead of an old white guy who was like, if you don't do it like this, it's not real art.
Yeah, fuck that. Yeah, that noise sucks.
I think last time I mentioned him, I think it was last
yes.
time. But
yeah, you were talking about your teacher.
Man, and now he's sad and lonely. I love whenever I hear somebody in my 20s, you're going to be sad and old and lonely one day, and then it comes true.
Oh, wait. This is still a part of his shield, isn't it?
I don't know.
Let's say yes.
I think it is. I think he has a weird, like, half thingy.
Yeah.
Where it's like, so that he's extra angsty.
Yes. That angst.
Extra
I think that's what was resonating with me as a kid. I developed angst. I had it. I experienced it. Based on experiences, I think the angst came, but also there was something about it that made sense to me. Like, yeah, F everything. Because everything sucks.
I keep going to say something, and the influencer voice. I think once you started it, you can't stop. It's like how if I slip and my southern accent comes out, I'll just be stuck like that until I go to sleep. I keep going, oh my God. Oh my, I need to do some of these videos because it cracks me up. I will watch horrible influencer videos just to laugh at them doing that voice. And I will send it to people and be like, oh my God, what's wrong with them?
I'm sure people watch, if people were to watch our videos, watch mine, I'll speak for myself. They would probably go like, why does he talk like that? Why does he sound like that too?
Oh, I know. I 100%. If I believed in AI, I would 100% use it for the voiceovers on my videos. That's why I have really leaned into the coloring, is because I don't have to do voiceovers for most of it. I'm just like, we're going to flip through this coloring book today. It came out in this year. All right, here's some music. And I'm out. So.
And gotcha,
I've got my Man from Atlantis video that's pretty much finished.
What is it?
Man from Atlantis. The 1977 ABC TV show starring
not familiar.
Patrick Duffy Pre-Dallas, where he's from Atlantis and he fights crime. And it was going to be a Kenner toy line. And then the show got canceled. The toy line got canceled. And for a long time, it was believed to be one of the great unreleased toy lines of the 70s, with no product ever released.
Until much better unreleased things happened, and it was no longer considered one of the greatest.
Until one night on eBay, I discovered that, in fact, there was at least one item released from the movie.
Got it. It was not
now
really
I own
an unreleased line.
I'm making a whole video of it. So.
Nice. So what? I got to check that out. But I'm curious. Did that person have like a costume, or was he just looking like a normal person?
It was Patrick Duffy, and his costume was a pair of yellow skin-tight trunks.
Oh.
So it was fun research.
Are we talking like Speedos? Are we talking like 70s trunks?
Like 70s version of, 70s trunks, but there was,
Yeah. Yes.
There's a little extra Duffy in there for you.
Mm-hmm. A little extra junk in the trunks.
Yeah, sea trash, if you will. It's a sea cucumber. But
Is this blacks or these grays? What are these? Let's call them dark black. Oh, let's talk theme song.
Really quickly.
Yeah,
Hi,
go ahead.
Kenzo.
Hey, Kenzo, if I see you at a con, like I said last night, I'm going to give you a big hug. Sorry.
Yeah,
Did you catch? Yeah,
I
I
caught that on the replay. Well, I was watching it, but then because I was filming, I was filming and it fell behind. So I had to go back and rewatch it. And I was like, what the? Because I caught it afterwards. I came back because the live was like, you're not actually watching this, are you? And YouTube just stopped it for me. Thanks, YouTube. And so I came back and was seeing the chat and people in the chat, and I was like, what did I miss? And then I went back and I was like, oh my God, what? Like, that's bizarre. And then I was just like, this is why I don't drink and jump on the internet.
You think that's what was happening? I think there were some real feelings there.
I think
but anyway, whatever. You know what? I'm sorry I brought it up. I kept bringing it up last night too. I probably should know.
Well, I think it is what happened. I think the real feelings was because some people who have issues with holding their liquor will often sort of joke it off and they'll do stupid stuff while they're drunk. I have an uncle who I think just went back to jail for like his 17th drunk driving offense. He doesn't have a drinking problem. But so he'll do my uncle, we'll talk about my uncle here, right? So my uncle.
Yes, we're talking about your uncle. That's what we're talking about here. Yeah. Allison's uncle.
My uncle. Come with me while we discuss childhood trauma. So anyway, he will get drunk and say really rude and hateful shit.
Okay.
And the next day he apologizes. And everyone's like, he's like, I'm sorry, I wouldn't have said that, but I was drunk. And everyone accepts the apology. And then one day you call them on it. It's like, well, this is a pattern. You keep doing it. You keep getting drunk and saying shitty stuff and then apologizing the next day. But you say the same shitty stuff every time you get drunk. You're mean to people every time you get drunk. And then you just apologize the next day. It's kind of like, diet Catholicism. Like you go say a couple Hail Marys and confess your sins, and then you do it all over again. And then you go and you absolve yourself, and that's fake. And my uncle would get really mad because I would call him on that. I'm like, it doesn't. If you keep apologizing for the same shit every day when you're sober, and then that night you get drunk again and you do it all again, you're actually just not correcting your behavior. You're excusing it, and people are letting you get away with it. And whenever I would call my uncle on it regularly, he'd get really mad at me. But unfortunately, not stop talking to me. You know, because if you're going to be a bad person, just go be a bad person and leave me out of it. So anyway, that's my thought based on my experience and what I've lived through in my life.
Sure.
You're wrong.
And clearly people need help at the end of the day. And I get that. Yeah. But like, yeah. And the other piece of that is we're generally on the clubhouse. Yeah. This is messed up to say. No,
the other part of it,
we are all adults is what I was trying to say. I was gonna start to say some of us are, but no, that's dumb. We're all adults biologically, and so and legally. And so when that stuff kind of pops up, it is really sad. And so sometimes we have the patience for it, sometimes we don't. Some of us have real things that we need to deal with in our lives, and other people who are maybe closer to us that we need to help that have these problems. So we don't feel the need to spend a Saturday night where we're supposed to be having pretending we're kids and having fun, dealing with the dude who's out of pocket and unnecessarily threatening and violent. And it's just, it's sad though, because, ultimately they're still in the community, and I know I'll see them often, whether it's virtual or in real life at a con. And, it's awkward, and I don't exactly know what to do, and ultimately, I guess
this is where I fall on. In general, this is my take on situations such as that. There are a handful of people that I have on my YouTube show, or I go on their show, or I go hang out with them that are at I actually consider friends, right?
Ooh, is that me?
You're one of them because you're
Oh,
obviously
yay.
many
Cool.
times, but Brick has been here many times. We also have conversations outside of live stream stuff.
Yeah, we do.
And there are people I am friends with only because we do YouTube stuff together. And that doesn't mean we're not good friends. But that's a parasocial thing. And I think the problem is when it's somebody who you're only parasocial with, the emotional labor to help them correct bad behavior is far more than you're invested and should be. And that energy should be saved for your friends, your community. Like, you shouldn't have to call in somebody who's not part of your community.
Okay.
And that's, I think, what sometimes we maybe run into. And, like, I'm speaking generally here. There may be certain recent circumstances this could apply to. But I will just say it's not my job to call somebody out who's being an asshole because they can't handle their booze if they're not actually my friend. If we're just parasocial because we've been on the stream together, I've been in chat when they've been on the stream, ain't my job. It is my job to get pissy if they go after one of my friends.
Yeah.
And that's different.
Talking about you, Kenny.
Yeah, Kenny
the friend part.
Kenny is one of my friends. So I was extra pissy about that situation because Kenny is one of the, as a decent. I love Kenny. Exactly. We all love Kenny. Kenny is a good person. But Kenny also doesn't put up with bullshit. And Kenny made an observation that's very much like one I made, but I just didn't say it on a stream because I don't have emotional labor for it. Kenny did, and he said something. And somebody just didn't appreciate that. And you know what? That's somebody else's journey in life. It's not ours. It's not Kenny's. If that person doesn't have people in their life who can break that down for them, then I feel bad for them. But not bad enough to involve myself. Beyond being an asshole to my friend.
Masyadong complicado. Very complex, I guess I should say. Too complex.
Let's see. Hello, Eric. I got, the illustration that Brick and I are working on right now are from a Japanese coloring book that I purchased a PDF of on Etsy. It was Etsy. So if you want Battle of the Planets, you should be able to look up PDF coloring book on Etsy and find this one. And we have other images that I haven't gotten to yet that are I scanned, and they're from an actual Battle of the Planets coloring book that I own. So far, the only thing that are actual illustrations I've done myself are the Blade Runner shorts that dropped last week. So 3 Blade Runner shorts that are mine, and then there's 1 Blade Runner of Priss that my friend Dora Raymaker, go buy her book on Amazon. Actually, I think she has 2 books there now. But anyway, she did a Priss for me. So those are the only, and there's an old from like 2 years ago Carrie Fisher drawing I did. But otherwise, everything's from old coloring books.
Oh, flames. Gotcha, man. Let's get back to it. It's rad.
Gotcha, man. Yeah, right? Anyway.
Gotcha, man is rad. Other things that I like about it. Can I say the bad guys were dope? And if I had the time, and I don't know how much we're good, but I would do this guy next. Because these troops, I thought, were incredibly cool. Their outfits, like, I don't know if they were supposed to be, I don't know, what is that, a tiger? But they were green. Which, whatever, because they're from another galaxy. So
the one bad guy, Zoltar, I think, was supposed to be some sort of fox or a cat or something. I don't know.
I love that he was super femme too. Like he was kind of like gender bending, breaking too.
In the US he was just femme. In the Japanese original, I did look this up. In the Japanese original, he was actually a little girl that the big villain evolved into a grown man. So
There you go.
do with that as you will. Japan representing
This is-
gender non-conforming
Sure.
back in the
Yeah.
70s. I mean, we had that
As a
in the
villain.
US. Yeah.
But
Well, you know.
I know.
There's also gender non-conforming villain on Transor Z, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of that in Japanese manga and animation.
And we
And
didn't get any of that in the US until him on the Powerpuff Girls.
I never watched that. But there's another one, very Gotcha Man, right?
I think, yeah,
Theme, multiple colors, a theme. They were young.
I
They were kind of
recommend.
they were a science team too, right? Weren't they robots? Were they
No,
robots
they
or
were little girls created by the professor. He mixed sugar and spice and everything nice with ingredient X, and that
nice?
created the Powerpuff Girls. You should watch it.
Nice.
They're short. They're very short.
I did. No, I watched a lot,
Oh,
but I didn't watch it every episode. I
got
kind
it.
of jumped in and out, but then not a lot of it stuck. I remember
Yeah,
it in general, and I
my
remember
favorites were him and Mojo Jojo.
Mojo. That was the
That was
little
the monkey.
ape alien looking thing.
Yeah,
Green.
he was a lab monkey, and he was created at the same time as the Powerpuff Girls. And the explosion that created him, he was infected by ingredient X and evolved into a evil. I think they said monkey, but I think later they referred to him as an ape because it's a cartoon. It's the 90s. Nobody cared.
Yeah, nobody cared.
But yeah, no, that was one of my favorite. I enjoyed that quite a bit. I used to have a Bubbles keychain, and then I was like Pikachu and Bubbles. Those were my keychains. Even though I don't do any Pokemon, I thought Pikachu chose me, so I chose you, Pikachu.
Yeah, he was a great design and stuck out to me too among all of the different Pokemon.
Yeah, I liked Pikachu.
There were a couple in there that I was like, oh, they look cool. But
I knew who Jigglypuff was because that was my coworker who was a / boss who sat across the aisle from me at the call center. And Jigglypuff was her favorite. And one of our other coworkers was like, well, there's a theory that whoever your favorite Pokemon is, you kind of look like them. And, she did kind of look like Jigglypuff in the face. So I can't deny. And I was a lot fluffier back then and had poorly bleached chunks of blonde hair. So I did have a little bit of a Pikachu thing happening.
Nice.
So we were all doing chunks back then, kids. I did a couple blonde chunks, and then I had the dark red chunk, and then a bunch of the hair fell out, and then I stopped doing it.
I love that they had special moves too. They do that whole cyclone thing where they'd stand like a pyramid, like a bunch of cheerleaders, and then would spin.
Yeah, it's got a specific name too. Let me find it.
Something cyclone. And I love the idea that they were ninjas and like, that weird, whatever that concept was that made it to the US of what a ninja was kind of in my head blended with them, even though they never totally showed that other than, some classic,
but there's
martial arts, karate.
Right. There's such a culture of sort of ninjas in sort of a lot of the Japanese media of the time, which of course then translated to us finally getting it in the 80s and everything being ninja. Like G.I. Joe had ninjas, even Masters of the Universe got some ninjas.
Ooh, yes, they did. I got mine.
Ninjor.
I'm excited. Yeah, he is the Masterverse.
Yeah.
He's really cool.
I have the Masterverse Ninjor because I was going to use them for, Jiu-Jitsu because I was going to use them for parts. And now I need to get another one because he's actually really cool. And I like that, because again, our 80s properties were not always, Sometimes they were a little racist, and it wasn't until like 2021 or whatever when I got my my jitsu figure that
Jitsu.
I was like, oh, oh, oh. I
It
think, yeah,
hit you.
it hit me. I was, and like, cause you just as a kid, you're just like, he's got a big golden hand. That's really cool.
Imagine
And
how that hit me.
yeah, right. And that's what I did like about Masterverse is they fixed that. So my goal was to like take him and do a head swap onto my or
Hmm.
to an Origins Jitsu. But
Okay.
I like him so much I might actually buy a second one just to keep him. Let's see. All right, the
Yeah, he had that sort of
rotor,
good guy energy because it was new to
yeah,
new Eternia.
rotor force, rotor force.
Oh, is that what they called the
Yeah,
spinny
that's
cyclone thing?
yeah. In the American version, who knows? All right, I just finished the princess. So
I don't know what this random flame is, but it exists.
sometimes stuff is just on fire, and it's okay. I mean, it's like there's a whole song. She's just a girl and she's on fire. Why? We don't know. She just
I'm just a girl, I'm on fire. The theme song. That's what I was trying to get to. The theme song for this, forever etched in my mind. It has that sort of valiant, heroic orchestration, like dun, 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 dun. I loved that
yeah,
theme
it's a
song.
pretty good theme song. I think I used that for the tile that I stuck on Instagram to advertise that we were doing this today.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious. I am kind of curious how much people are familiar with Gotcha Man or whatever, and I know they've been trying to do different
Right.
revivals. There's like the most recent one is a completely different take on it. There was talks of a live action film that was supposed to be in the works, and one that was done by an actual like a U.S. production company. So, and it was somebody famous who I'm forgetting now who was like, I want to do a Gotcha Man show or a movie. I
I
don't know
think.
what's become of it, but I would
I
love to see
think.
something.
Yeah, I think. I feel like the problem with what probably keeps happening is what happened to the Gem movie is they keep trying to take it too far from the actual concept.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because it needs to be this for modern audiences, and I think people in Hollywood need to stop that. I don't think Battle of the Planet. Let me rephrase that. I don't think Battle of the Planets needs a hot new take because there are so many people who aren't familiar with the original take that I think what something like Gotcha Man, Battle of the Planets. Well, I think that's the key. Like they need to actually, instead of adapting Gotcha Man, they need to take Battle of the Planets and do that as the adaptation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then bring in the Gotcha Man stuff later, like. So it's just weird because like Hollywood, keeps not wanting to do new things, but then when they do adapt things, they keep changing stuff that doesn't need to be changed because there's not enough. I think the thinking is, well, not enough people know. But the problem is like with Gem and the holograms, it's like, yeah, not enough people knew or, knew enough about Gem for them to be like, I can't believe that it's completely different. But the problem is when you change it so much and you lose the core fan base, then there's no word of mouth.
Sure.
Like for something like Gotcha Man Battle of the Planets, you need to probably do a Battle of the Planets that's a pretty faithful recreation of the American version from the 70s. So that the people who do remember it have something to latch onto. And then you expand it out with stuff from the original Gotcha Man version. Like you have to sort of like cluster Earth it together, like so that you can get everyone who's invested in it invested into the new thing enough that their excitement, their interest, their enthusiasm is contagious for people to go see it. Because what people I always, and this is where people misunderstand why the Marvel movies blew up. People are like, oh, well, like it was accessible. Well, yeah, that was it. But the other side of it was comic book fans were enthusiastic about these movies. And for a really long time, they were pretty faithful to the comic books. So the OG comic book fans for those first few waves of Marvel movies were really invested because they were actually adapting from the comics and they weren't doing weird shit to appeal to a wider audience. So they were talking to dragging their friends and family, and their friends and families went and enjoyed them. But I think what the downside of that is when it was time to start pivoting away from the comic book, because you now have people who've never read any of the comics who are now invested in these movies. You can't really do the deep cuts the same way anymore because, like, I sort of laugh and roll my eyes whenever She-Hulk came out. People were like, oh, that's just woke ideology. They're bringing She-Hulk. We don't need a She-Hulk. We already have a Hulk. Why would they create this new character? Right. So, and it's funny, and
if people said that, they're losers. But
they really did. I read tweets
allegedly.
People were saying that, and I was like, girl. And I will say, anytime a man baby loses their mind about woke ideology, if you call them girl in your response, they really, really disapprove. But there were people who didn't get it. They didn't understand this is, and quite frankly, Jennifer Walters has been far more successful in comic books over the last 40 years than Bruce Banner has been, or David Banner, or whatever his name is this week. So I think that's sort of where Marvel went off was in the beginning. They had all of the old the original OG fans were invested, and then they picked up a significant audience of people who never picked up a comic book. And at that point, they were so invested in the original material that it didn't.
Sure.
And I'm not saying because
I'm not sure. That, well, I hear you, and I'm listening for sure.
I think you have to find sort of that sweet spot in between.
Yes,
where it's like
and that's the challenge these
appealing
days.
to a new audience, appealing to the OG audience, but it's really hard with something like Marvel, where you're releasing 4 movies a year and 17 series, and there's a constant flood of content.
Well, let me. Since you're talking MCU and Marvel, and I'm trying to connect it to GeForce Gotcha Man, there's a similar problem. Definitely Marvel has a lot more of a problem because, and the problem is, not really a problem, but Marvel Comics have been around forever. These characters have been around forever and have changed and had different iterations. And when we say OGs or comic book folks, I would count sort of myself in there because I love the comic books as a kid, but I was born in 1976. And some of those characters had about more than a decade of existence and life prior to that. And then right around that time when I was growing up, Marvel was in the process of licensing their stuff out for TV shows and cartoons. And so whatever the version that someone had or embraced or loved of a character wasn't necessarily at that point even like the one from the comics, right? And so they've had all these different versions and iterations, and let alone there's that, and then just the existence of the character. Like Bruce Banner has gone through a lot canonically in the canonical 616 comic book runs, right? Like he's changed. He's been gray, then green, then back to gray, and then smart, and then not smart, and then was a hero and then a villain, like all sorts of stuff. And so by the time they get to the MCU, they have what I was sort of framing as a problem, and not necessarily a bad problem per se, but the problem is there's so much to draw from. What parts do you accentuate? What parts do you ignore? What parts do you completely like change and transform? Because at that point, with like 40 plus years of versions of the Incredible Hulk or of Iron Man to draw from, it's like, well, they do what Marvel Studios did, which was we like this. And to some people, if you're a diehard comic book fan of a particular period, you're like, no, that's wrong. This never happened. Some of that happened. And then you've got, like you said, the new people to draw in. So I think I say problem, but there's like a creative fun like conundrum to deal with. Like, how do I? And a little bit of a plus. It's kind of like when you're doing a bunch of rough drafts of a thing, you get to step back and go, okay, what parts of this suck or aren't as
Right.
fun, and what parts are really good. And then you kind of find yourself in this fun place where you're like, okay, I've got 40 years to draw on. What are the best parts, the parts that resonate, the parts that we can, that still work today, yada, yada, yada. So now
Right.
fast forward or come back to Gotcha Man G-Force. What do you do for, like, say, a thing that plays here in the United States or plays in Japan? Do you do Gotcha Man? Do you do Battle of the Planets? Hell, do you do
Right.
G-Force? Do you include Seven's Arc 7? Do you not? Like, and so, and then on top of that, you're now playing to an audience who has seen the stuff I referenced earlier, who has seen
Right.
Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and maybe Sentai, Go Ranger, maybe, Voltron. And so they have archetypes in their head that like are kind of competing and blurring, and they're like, okay, what is this supposed to be? And so to me, if we let go of all that and move to this magical fantasy place where I live and can be like, oh, they made a movie, I want to watch it and judge it based on what I see in the movie theater, then it'll be all fine. But
Right.
then if you live in this other world where people walk in and go like, this better be this one episode I like, or this better be this one movie
Right.
redux, then we get into problems. So the big question would be, I guess, as you're saying, what do they pull from? Do they blend? Do they just stick to, the first story arc? Like, what do they do if they were to bring Gotcha Man back today? And you were saying, I wish Hollywood would just sort of stick to the essence of things and not change it. I totally hear that, because sometimes you're literally just making stuff up and you're like, well, like, I guess, like
I
the
mean, a
original.
perfect example is like the Lost in Space movie from like what, 97, 98? Like,
Yeah.
they took,
With Joey from Friends
yeah, right. And like,
and the girl from Boogie Nights.
yeah, Heather Graham. Was it Heather Graham?
Yes. I love Heather Graham, but yes.
Yeah, so like you've got that where it's like, and they took the basic story, but then moved it so far away that, like, because for any property
That
that
it's
is
no
in,
longer itself. It's no longer
yeah,
lost in
and for
space.
any property that has a yeah, and it's not memorable. I don't remember anything that I went and saw that at the theater opening night, right? I don't
I
remember
owned that
anything.
on DVD because I liked it so much. So I'm
I
not
don't
probably the
remember.
best person to jump with you, but I get the premise. Yeah.
I don't remember anything that happened in that movie because it felt so like Hollywood committee made. Like, it felt like,
It was.
okay, we need this scene right now. We've got not Joey Lawrence. We've got Joey from Friends. So we need to cater to the Friends audience that's going to come watch him in this movie. And I just don't remember feeling like it had much of a personality. And I don't remember much of the story. I mean, they get lost in space.
I remember Joey had a cool helmet that would like go over his head like the Batmobile cocoon.
Well, yeah, I remember some of the effects, right? I remember
Sure.
some of the
But story,
like
relationships.
none of that. I think him and Heather Graham had flirtation, maybe,
They did. Yes.
but otherwise, it just didn't stick. And I think part of that was whoever was responsible for greenlighting that was like, well, let's redo Lost in Space. Star Wars is making all this money now, and I felt like going to it, they were trying to cash in on Star Wars.
I think they're just trying to cash in, period. But I hear you. They're seeing the model, I guess, of what Star Wars was doing.
And instead of taking the essence of what Lost in Space is and why people attach to Lost in Space, and then working from there, instead of like, let's Star Wars.
Yeah, that's again though to my point. Sorry, I'm speaking over you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
But to my point, it's so hard to figure out what is that original property. Do you go back to the 50s or 60s show or whatever? Do you go to, I don't know, like, yeah, I guess, and it's not Lost in Space, but like they're clearly just also genre like connecting. So they're like, anything sci-fi, let's mix in this thing from science fiction that people know and love, and at a certain point, there's been so much content and so much like stuff related that they're kind of just like, well, what if we did, like this thing, this effect from Batmobile, from the Batmobile, from whatever it is. Like, and to, I guess, to your point, like, you're putting so much extra stuff on it that we forgot what Lost in Space was supposed to be.
Right. We
And then I
forgot.
guess is where I was sort of saying, like, well, what is that though? Is it truly campy 50s television that was sometimes kind of a little bit maybe creepy and
But the
scary?
thing
Not really.
is Lost in Space wasn't meant to be campy when it started. They
But then they
sort of
leaned into it once they
they
had the
leaned
robot,
into it,
right? Yeah,
right, right. It leaned into it eventually because that's what people responded to.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
initially, it wasn't meant to be campy. Like it's
Was
like
it
the
meant to
bat.
be like a Star Trek, like hard sci-fi
It
kind
was
of
kind
thing?
of. It was more supposed to be sort of like family friendly Star Trek, if you will. Like,
Okay.
and I don't even know if I think it maybe even predates Star Trek a little bit. So I would have to check the exact dates. But I, like it used to come on before school when I lived with my grandparents in Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
I would watch that and Hazel, which was a family sitcom about a maid named Hazel.
Oh, I don't
Um,
remember that one at all.
yeah, don't. It was my grandmother left it though. It was one of her favorite things when she was a kid, or when she was raising one of my aunts. I think the dead aunt, not the one that needs to die. Um, but
There
but what
she
I
is.
remember about Lost in Space was the evil scientist, the robot. The kid was always in danger. Um, and that occasionally there was a really bad rubbery monster. I didn't remember that he had sisters. I didn't remember anything other than the evil scientist, the robot, the kid, and that the parents would show up at the end, sort of. Um, so, and this, of course, is centering myself in the Lost in Space, but I feel like that's what sort of the essence is, the evil scientist endangering sort of the family and the robot and bad monsters. And like I feel like that's all they sort of should have, that's what they should have focused on. They tried to do the big origin story of how they got lost in space. I don't think they ever did that story on the TV show. I think it just started with them lost in space. Could be wrong. But I never remember seeing an episode. And again, syndication, you didn't always get the whole show. Sometimes they would just re-show the same episode
Chunk.
20 times.
Mm-hmm.
Like within a 6-month period before replacing it with some other old TV show. But I don't remember them like doing a big like this because that would have been expensive to show how they got lost in space on sort of 50s 60s television budget. Like why couldn't it just start with them already lost in space on the planet or when they crash land on the planet or I don't know.
Yeah, just
I like
give us the origin story through the theme song, like Gilligan's Island.
something like I like a movie that starts with the adventure. And then we get the origin as needed, and I feel like that's part of what I've grown really with superhero movies is that we have to get the origin story every time. So it's like I've seen the Spider-Man origin story on the big screen like what 17,000 times since 1980 or whatever.
Not the MCU though, except for oh no, I guess the first ones. No, you're right. Yeah, like Iron Man,
Like,
the first one, Thor,
like
Hulk.
I feel bad for Bruce Wayne about his parents, but I don't ever need to see them shot in Crime Alley again. Like just let them die. Let it die. Just like I don't need Batman Year One again. I just want movies where like Batman is being Batman. It's kind of what I liked about Batman Returns. We didn't get like a big or even the original Batman 89. We didn't really get a huge Batman origin. You got the like the Joker kills his parents, sort of through flashback, but it's not like a proper origin for that movie.
You were Dance of the Devil in the Pale Moonlight.
Yeah, like you get the origin in it, but they don't start chronologically. It's like Batman Returns, you kind of get the Penguin's origin in the beginning, but it's really brief. It's really quick, and it's like the rest of the movie is just Batman being Batman and Catwoman awakening things in people. Um, and I feel like, like even I liked Batman and Robin. I know a lot of people think it's trash, but I thought that was because again, we're not getting. I mean, we did get the horrible Batgirl origin from that. Where, hi, I'm Barbara Wilson. I'm gonna put this on and race bikes. Hooray! I'm Batgirl.
Oh man, I don't even remember that anymore.
Yeah, that Batman, whatever.
They actually showed her origin in that.
That was her origin. She showed up to see her uncle Alfred, and she stole a bike.
Oh my
She beat
god, I
some
don't
people
remember
up,
that.
and then she put on a Batgirl suit.
Oh, I don't remember her being related to Alfred.
Huh. Yep, that was her Uncle Alfred.
Oh well.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll survive. And we got.
Hi, Andrew. We haven't said hello to Andrew, I don't think.
Probably not. Oh, there we go. Hello, Andrew. Lovely. I've missed a few people. I apologize. This is just what happens with me and Brooke. Let me scroll back and make sure.
I make her blab.
All right, we're caught up. Excellent. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Andrew's here and catching up, it looks like. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you were both saying that same. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think Andrew and I were both having. Yeah, the Barbara Wilson thing in Batman Returns was questionable at best.
I don't even remember it. That's how awesome it was and stuck in my brain.
I liked George Clooney is my favorite Batman though, after Michael Keaton. He was the first time I was like, that's a Batman I would go home with.
Okay.
R.I.P. Val Kilmer, but not my Batman. And Ben Affleck can suck it. I went and watched that movie he did, like what was it, like The Town or something? Ugh.
I don't know that I ever saw it.
I was like, I see why J-Lo left you, and she went back to him, so whatever.
No, J-Lo.
Poor J-Lo.
Yeah.
All that almost talent, and she still just can't. It's just not gonna work out for that kid.
I would love to see a Gotcha Man, regardless if they nail it, regardless if it's bad. I just kind of want to see it because I think it could potentially make for some cool 2-hour thing or even a series. I am also a lot more optimistic than a lot of my fellow nerds of my age about adaptations, because I do see that there's been some great ones, like on Netflix. Like Netflix tackling One Piece the way they did seemed on paper an impossibility, and it would never work. And I absolutely love it. So I don't know. I think it's things are possible. I would love for them to do like a small little adventure, like you're saying. I don't need the origin either. Like they're already a team, and Galactor invades, and what now? They're now they have to show up and be a team.
Did you watch the Netflix Voltron?
I did, and I loved it.
I honestly, like, when I was watching that, it was when I was frustrated because I couldn't find any Battle of the Planets to properly watch. But I would like that team to actually, I think I would trust them to take it, because I felt like with Voltron, they did a really good job of sort of updating it to make it sort of, the kids, if you went on, kids loved it. Like, and when I say the kids, I mean like the teenagers and the 20-year-olds. There's a lot of fan art.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And again, I think that you're sharp to name that one, because I think that is the closest thing to Gotcha Man that's been done. And they took liberties, and I thought they were really great. And they also had to do the thing that I was alluding to earlier, and had to balance Go Lion versus Voltron versus, and they didn't do too much of that. They kind of embraced a lot more of the Voltron, but I don't know. And then I will say I like the idea of taking some creative license. Like I remember there was a script going around for a live action Voltron for a while. I think it was Justin Marks, I want to say, who like famously did a lot of screenplays of nerd properties.
Yeah.
But it was cool. It was kind of a post-apocalyptic Earth, and there's this, mysterious princess and her sort of bodyguard, kind of wandering, and they're looking for artifacts in the desert, and it's the lions, and like there were those things that were not in the original that were worked into this thing. It was a little bit Mad Max meets, Voltron.
Yeah.
And I dug it. So I'm generally a lot more open, I think, than the next person to just sort of people taking a swing, giving it a shot, because sometimes they might come up with something. Sometimes it might be a Lost in Space, which, again, full disclosure, I kind of liked, so people can judge me as they want.
Oh,
But yeah. So I don't know. I think Gotcha Man is actually, of all the different properties, relatively accessible, like easy to put on screen too, whether it's live action, definitely animation, easy peasy. But I don't know. I would love to see it. And so Hollywood, if you care, I'll give you $20 or whatever.
I feel like Hollywood should care because they're always trying to break into Asian markets.
Yeah.
And I feel like if they nailed it, like it would definitely get them into Asian markets because there's a much bigger following over there than over here.
Yes.
So, and that's ultimately like, I think part of what's happening right now though is if you've noticed with even Marvel's, even all the big blockbusters are kind of bombing right now. Or bombing is not there. They're not performing as expected as
sure.
But I think people are reaching. I mean, I will say the last movie I went and saw at a theater was Sinners.
Oh God!
And I adored it.
Can we just do a whole stream talking about Sinners? But
I would love to. Yeah, like let's figure out how to work that in. But like, I just left it. Like, and it was not. It had a pretty decent budget. It was not like low budget, but like.
Right.
I'm a huge fan of horror movies, and it was just nice to watch a horror movie where I didn't feel like I knew what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. My favorite horror movie is Friday the 13th, followed by the Slumber Party Massacre. So my taste in horror movies is questionable. It does lean towards sort of 70s and 80s slashers. But at the same time, I love a good. I find The Exorcist the first Exorcist very boring, and not scary. I think she was just having a bad period. Our puberty was, some of us, that's what our puberty looks like, guys. But also I didn't grow up Catholic. I think if you're super religious or super Catholic, The Exorcist was probably super scary. Yeah, but with Sinners, like, I enjoyed Sinners so much. Like, it just felt like I was watching something I hadn't seen before. Mm-hmm. It was, oh God, I'm going to sound like it was a fresh voice. And come with me while we go see this movie with a fresh voice in Hollywood. But I didn't feel like I'd seen it 20 times. I didn't feel like I don't typically care for, I don't want to spoil it. So I'm just going to say the type of monster that they use in Sinners is not a monster I typically enjoy very much. I find that archetype of a monster very boring and very, yeah, like I'm not
overused, maybe
not even overused. Like, I feel like there's some things happening I think there's a easy way to make that monster appealing and not scary and attractive to people. Okay. And I don't think horror should be attractive that way. I think horror should always be about exploring revulsion instead of, like, once you make something safe enough that it can be sexy, like, I feel like it's done.
Okay, got it.
But
like, do you feel like Sinners did a good job of recognizing that is a thing that's happened in American pop culture?
I feel like Sinners,
and they worked it in.
I think the reason it worked was because Sinners directly used that
exactly, yeah,
to like make a point.
Yep.
And for me, that was why I think that particular monster worked, because they were addressing the whole thing I don't like about that monster these days. And it just, and with a bunch of other stuff in there that felt really relevant to,
Yeah,
today.
man.
In a way, horror should be. Horror should be addressing, even like my
I mean,
beloved. Oh, sorry.
no, I
What
was
were
just
you-
gonna say, yeah, and I know we're kind of talking around it a little bit, but I will say I appreciate that brand of horror, if I can say that, in that it's actually, to me, in my experience and the things that I'm most scared of in life, it's actually speaking to the scariest things,
Right.
the things that actually scare me the most, on multiple levels. And so I really, really, really love this sort of new brand of horror, if you will, between this and Get Out, which I was just talking with my wife about the other day. We were both just reminiscing on how great that was. And there's a lot of great things like that that are exploring ideas that are far more scary to me, and then the idea of like a random monster or even a serial killer. Like, feel
Yeah.
like the serial killer, and this because you're like a
Yeah.
yes, but that it's just plays into a particular narrative of the time about crime and danger, and that,
Well, with slasher films, there's also like slashers
and then
really hit their zenith post women's liberation.
yes, yeah,
So there's sort of the weird intermingling of misogyny, but also you usually get a final girl who is
held up.
representation of women's empowerment at the same time where she has to be a virgin and she has to.
Mhm.
So there's like you can take them very literally, or you can see sort of that subtext where it's like, well, if you're the right kind of victim, you can survive. Like,
Right.
oh, she's a virgin, she's blonde, she's pretty. Okay, she's good. Like, there's some subtext there if you are paying attention.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but
And it works in the, not just in the one movie really, but like in the many movies across different
yeah,
characters of that same kind of model, and then it just eventually sort of washes over you, and you start to get this sense of like, oh, certain people survive and
yeah.
certain people, yeah, no,
Well, it
totally.
also, the slasher movie as is, this 70s, 80s heyday is it's a done genre. Every so often somebody will do a throwback movie that works, but slasher in general doesn't quite work. It didn't work again until like Scream, where we went
Mm-hmm.
postmodern with it, where it was self-referential, where they started breaking
Mm-hmm.
those rules, right?
Yep.
It became much more queer coded with Scream, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
like focusing on the otherness of the final girl and the trauma of, like Sydney's whole thing is like she's traumatized, her mom was murdered. So it became about trauma which is, for the 90s works. I think the reason slasher movies aren't really working now is it hasn't evolved to the next thing that the slasher needs to represent. For specifically American audiences, I'm not. It's not that I don't care about Europe and other countries, but I think slasher is a uniquely American. The slasher film, like the Italians have giallo, which is very similar, but not. And that's very much of Italian culture of the 60s and 70s. So anyway, back to Sinners, which roundabout carries back to Battle of the Planets. But I think Sinners does a really good way of capturing really specific societal
Yeah.
issues and like sort of
Yep.
addressing through the concept of horror and through allegory. So
Yep.
and I think that's
Oh,
why
that movie is so beautifully layered. I love it, and
yeah,
everything Ryan Coogler does just resonates with me on a deeper, I guess, in a way that's like, oh my god, I knew it was possible to take the genres that I love and tell
mhm,
dope stories that I personally like resonate with on this, like, oh, I feel both seen, but also both like you're making me think in
yeah.
a profound way. And I love Sinners. I rewatched
When I feel
Wakanda
like,
Forever the other day. God,
and the
my money
fact
in the
that
bank.
it's hitting so good and audiences are responding so well, I feel is real. And a lot of the Marvel stuff and the big action movies are not. I mean, just recently when Tom Cruise had some big action adventure movie planned, and the studio just said no, we're not going to do it, and canceled it. He's trying to find a studio now.
Oh yeah.
But I feel like what with other things going on as far as financially in the United States right now,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think a lot of the studios are going to look at Sinners and realize, oh wait, we can get back to a place where going to the theater to see something that's not a big epic explosion blockbuster is not only possible, but we don't have to keep dumping good movies on streaming where they're not getting a chance to find audiences to connect with. Which is good for Gotcha Man / Battle of the Planets, because I feel like there are ways you could do it that's not a big budget spectacular and still speak to current societal things. Because even Star Wars, part of the success of Star Wars was that sort of post George Lucas saying, like, post Vietnam and post Watergate, we can still be hopeful, guys. Things could get better. There is a new hope. And I think that's part of Star Wars, is the original Star Wars movies. That's part of the success of those movies was, the dare to be hopeful and tapping into what society was looking for. And so I think, in Battle of the Planets, like, the basic concept is there's an evil empire in outer space trying to take over Earth. I mean, I feel like if you did that right, you could bring people together. There are a lot of conspiracy theorists who have these weird theories about lizard people from outer space that aren't V. And I feel like that you could really work Battle of the Planets, Gotcha Man, in a way that would appeal to lots of people. It could unite us all, Brick. It could unite us all.
Yeah. Gotcha Man unites us all. Science Ninja Team, teenagers, enhanced teenagers fighting to save the universe.
Yeah.
Sure.
There's an
Go. Let's go. I'm ready. Yeah. Thank you for that Sinners break. That was fantastic. I loved Sinners.
There's a way to.
More recently, have you watched Ironheart? Are you at all? Do you do Disney Plus?
Not. Well, my Disney Plus is not on right now, so I have not watched Ironheart yet. But let's see. We currently have Max. So we've had Max 4 months now. So 2 more months, it'll be time to turn Max off because we'll have caught up on everything, and then Disney Plus is next. And then we catch up on Disney Plus, which will be Ironheart, which I am excited for because I'm the audience for Ironheart. It's got all the things I want in TV.
It is much more enjoyable than people make it out to be. Surprise, surprise.
Well, it's got a black woman in it, so there are people on the internet who are not going to watch anything with a black woman being a superhero. So,
yeah, and it opens up the universe in a beautiful way, and to kind of it doesn't even open it up. I was going to say it sort of does to new aspects of the MCU. But it also is just sort of clarifying, I think, and deepening some things that have already been established about the universe. And there's just a journey that she takes. And I know that, some friends are a little bit tired of seeing young Black women in particular have to go through a certain level of trauma in order to be relevant or important. But I will say what they did with her, I really appreciated seeing some of these heroes truly struggle and like have a hard time over certain human aspects, and they did it as well with to a certain extent, like with Tony Stark. Tony had to deal with some trauma in the sort of it towards the end of the Infinity Saga, but they really showed some things that I think were really cool, like the human side of like the difficulty one might have in a certain situation.
That's
keeping
difficult.
It vague intentionally.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a difficult thing to navigate, though, because so much of the superhero, so much of what makes superheroes is baked in the origin story is invariably some sort of trauma. Like Superman, his home planet blows up, he's an orphan. Batman, his parents get murdered, he's an orphan. Wonder Woman has to leave Paradise Island to go to man's world to fight Ares and, you know, like the evils of
Mhm.
man's world. Green Lantern has to stop being a self-centered douche
I was
and
gonna say,
become
where are you
something
going with
bigger.
that one?
You know, the Flash, like, originally didn't have anything, and I think it's interesting that they've added this thing where his mom gets murdered, and suddenly people find Barry Allen more compelling. But Spider-Man, Uncle Ben, right?
Mm-hmm.
Iron Man, he's a drunk. The Hulk, his
Oh,
every part
later.
of his clothing but his pants explode. That's an issue. Um, you know, like the X-Men, they're like being hunted and killed um, by the government. Anyway, so you know, like trauma is baked into superheroes. So I think it's really difficult because you know, like especially when it comes to Black women, so much of the trauma,
Yes.
so much of media about Black women is based in trauma. With superheroes, it's more difficult to navigate because superheroes in general are based through some sort of trauma.
Sure.
So like I'm a little bit more forgiving in a superhero than I would be if it was like, you know, like a comedy show where it's like, oh, and this is Tanya and her parents were murdered horribly. Anyway, let's laugh.
Right.
You know, like, or if it's a drama where the basis of the drama is Black woman trauma. Superheroes are trauma baked. And I also say this is a white person. So if any Black women want to tell me I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So,
I will just say that, yeah, I think it does. It manages to sort of be, I think, cognizant of all that and not like
right.
sidestep it. But I don't know. There were just some things that were done with her character and the journey she goes on that I appreciated. Not, there are things that I didn't quite like about it, but not in the, again, see my comments earlier about the kind of consumer of media I am. I
Yeah.
generally start from the place of like curiosity and kind of joy, because these are stories that like this is my jam, right? Give me the weird sci-fi, magic, ninja, whatever stuff, fantasy. I'm into it. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of in a happy place that like it's become pop culture now. These subcultures become just culture,
Have you
and
read
so
any
I'm,
Octavia Butler books?
yes, for sure.
Okay. I was just about to
Um,
say, like, those have been, I had not for a long time. And over the last couple of years, I've finally managed to, and that's been really helpful with breaking out of the trauma thing as far, you know,
mhm.
because it's just
Yep.
sci-fi that happens.
Octavia Butler, in some ways, some of it was a little bit challenging for me to access,
Hmm.
but aka hard, just hard for me to get.
Yeah.
Um, but like, or like I didn't understand it. I shouldn't say get, but
Yeah.
yes. And so, but I will say once I sort of started vibing with it and understanding it, it kind of hit me like Kugler's work does. Like, oh my God, she's talking about things that no one else is
Yeah.
talking about that I can relate to,
Yeah.
whether it's about race or, critique of society, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But um, going back to Riri and her journey, I really, really, I had a good time with it. I didn't like everything. There were some choices that were a little bit odd. If you watch everything, Wakanda Forever is like, at this point, is my favorite MCU film for a bunch of different reasons. But the story being told in there, I really appreciate. But when you look at that Riri Williams and this one, there is a little bit of a weird disconnect that I'm still trying
Yeah.
to reconcile, because she lacked the sort of, I guess, paralyzing trauma that some suddenly seems to be
Right.
super important in this series. That aside, I think it's a good watch. I think it's fun. They released it differently. The first 3 episodes in one came out one week, and then the next week the other 3 episodes. Um, and I'm hoping that maybe that gave it somewhat of a shot. I don't know where people are at with it, but I would say check it out before you
Yeah.
judge it.
Yeah, that's the first on my list when I'm gonna rewatch Andor and watch
Oh,
Ironheart.
love Andor. Yeah.
I loved Andor quite. I I also am not generally a fan of realism in Star Wars.
I get
I
that.
prefer it to be space opera, but I will say that if they're going to give me realism in Star Wars, it needs to be and/or level realism, where it like actually. Well, I felt like everything paid off. Like I felt like they set it up. I felt like the acting was really good. I think that some of it, Star Wars, you know as well as I do how much Carrie Fisher, Space Mom, my idol. Carrie Fisher was a very limited actress. She, you know, like she was not ever going to win an Oscar, right? So I think some of it is Star Wars. I'm used to being very space opera.
Campy, not acty. Yeah, not well acted. Well is probably not the right word, but yes, I get you.
Yeah, it is what it is, right? Anyway, it's 2 hours, Brick.
Yeah.
I've got to get you ready for your stream.
Dude, I've got so much today, Allison. It's kind of crazy.
I know, but I'm glad we did this because we have been overdue for another one of the, and we'll do another one. And really quick, since
this is the third, right? Huh? We did Star Wars. We did Mon-Chi in this, or am I missing one?
Did,
Mythic Legions.
Yeah, we did. We also did one before that. I think we did a Sectars Mythic Legions with Oz.
That's right.
Then the Star Wars that was for my birthday that year. And then we did Mon-Chi, and then this one. And there's one I'm missing. I think we did another joint group one or some such. So. Really quickly, since I mentioned Octavia Butler, I'm going to start trying to fit into all of my live streams just a reading recommendation. So if you've not read The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr., who used to be known as Son of Baldwin on the internet, he took some time off from the internet. I recommend The Prophets. So, and I'll drop the name of that really quick.
Love that.
It's a really good book. It's by a Black queer author about Black queer things. So, but really well written. He's an amazing writer. And if you're somebody who's going to be turned off by the idea of reading Black queer fiction by Black queer authors, I'm sorry that you.
Fuck off. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's. I was going to say it more nicely, but fuck off. Anyway, it's a great book. Highly recommended. I am anticipating more of his work when he gets to it. But I don't want to rush it because it's really good. So anyway, on that note, Brooke, where can the people find you today?
Oh my gosh. So today, after this at 2:05 in about an hour, I will be hanging out with our friend Adam Drake on the Highly Articulated channel doing a much overdue. We like to do it monthly. We've gone 2 months without an episode of Monkey Business AWOC Talk Live. So we're going to talk about some Animal Warriors of the Kingdom. Jason Bienvenu, the creator of the line, will be joining us today, and we'll do some updates and kind of just talk that for about an hour. And then after that, at 3:45 over on my channel, bricksomething.com, we'll take you there. I'll be hanging out with my brother for the news today. I do this weekly thing called the Needless Ephemera We Saw, or the news, and we talk nerdy things, toys, generally, with a guest, and it's my brother who's been on the show. I think this is gonna be his third time now. With the Snowcat being out and being a thing right now, your June is beautiful, by the way, Princess. With the Snowcat being a thing right now with the HasLab, you know, this idea of like big, gigantic 112 vehicles. My brother, who I got to hang out with this week and play with his toys, has every G.I. Joe HasLab so far, including a Rattler that's still in a box. And so he's got some experience with these things. I kind of want to pick his brain and talk about that because he's got that. He scratch built a sort of Vamp Mark 6, I think is what he calls it, as a hobbyist. And
your brother has a really cool job though, right?
Yes, my brother is an Imagineer, a Disney exec, I suppose, at this stage. But we're gonna talk about all of that, like what that's like, and what the is that even realistic in 2025? At what point do you have to stop because people just won't have the money and or space?
Yeah.
Because it's not just that. Like we've got Bobby Vala's big old thing. We've got Mezco doing another big vehicle coming up.
Bobby Vala Gridiron, some O-rings, and I was like, he's not gonna make me pick up some Bobby Vala toys, is he? because I looked
He
at those
might.
and I'm like, she kind of would look cool next to my Zorana from 1987.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Well, that's
which
what
is
I'm
why you
doing.
never
So
see
that's
the
today at
waterfall.
3:45.
All right. Well, thank you, Brick. And thanks for hanging out.
Can we see your pages? Yeah, I want like real quick because you showed these pages up close. Let's see both of your pages. I saw Galactor kind of being, or not Galactor, whatever his name is, begins with a Z. I'd love to see both of them. Ah, there you go. And what are you using? We barely got to talk about our coloring. What are you using right there? Is that pencils?
Prismacolor. Yep.
Oh wow.
Yep.
It looks so
Prismacolor.
lush.
Yep.
Like you're filling in on those darks. That's cool. And then can you bring Jean?
This is only one purple. It's only one purple. I haven't
Wow,
shaded it yet.
that's just your touch, light, heavy and light.
It's different layers of texture, and I use a fancy paper. So paper makes a huge difference depending on what the tube is. Yep.
Yeah, I noticed that today.
So
I just went straight up copy paper.
Yeah, no.
Look at that.
Yeah. So,
sorry, big in her, please. She looked dope.
I'm big.
Look at the way you did the. Yes.
Well, I added a layer of yellow alcohol marker on top of it. So just
and so that'll still hit the paper without, because like doesn't the pencils kind of create like a waxy barrier or no?
Yeah, you can see a little bit that there's a little bleed. But not as much because the wax pencil, Prismacolors are super waxy. So
yeah, but it looks cool. It doesn't look like it still lets the other stuff through, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So I just did a light layer of all of the colors, and then a real light layer of the orange that I used here, and then yellow alcohol marker over it to give it that extra layer.
And Princess is her costume is mainly white. But that's what I was trying to do. The way you kind of use the blues to simulate the light on the white is so cool.
I figured that trick out looking at old Barbie storybooks. The artist on an old Barbie storybook, I was like, how is he doing the white of her leather boots and for Barbie and the Rockers? And I looked at him like, he's just got a bunch of blue on it. And so I started playing around with blue, and then it's two different blues, and then I blend it with just the white Prismacolor. So smooth it out.
Beautiful.
Anyway, there's your art lesson, kids.
Yeah, I love it. Allison Troy doing the coloring.
Yeah, that's the thing. Let's see. Anyway, tomorrow, speaking of coloring, there should be a. Let's see, where's my stupid? There we go. Let me tell you the right stuff that's going to be happening.
Real quick, this is why Allison wears those gloves. I saw your glove and I was like, oh yeah.
There's that, but also there's a brace under there so that my hand doesn't die.
Right. We're old. Look,
I made it for 40 minutes to an hour and a half without one the other day, and then it was just like, oh shit. All right. So they're always shorts. So definitely check out the shorts that will drop this week. And then Monday, I've got a strawberry shortcake color and chill spectacular, 5 different strawberry shortcake pages and time lapse. Wow. This one features the purple pie man of Porcupine Peak. And then shorts this week, we've got a strawberry shortcake short with orange blossom, and then some Dip Dot Star Wars. And then Friday, Dewback Patrol, again from the Dip Dot art design book. And then next Sunday, I will be here with Mint with Card, and we'll be coloring some She-Ra.
Oh, sweet.
And I think it will be his first live stream.
I was just going to ask. That's cool.
Yep. And I will put links out. He's growing his channel is brand new, and he's growing it. So we're going to try to get him some subs this week. So
Mint with Card.
Yeah. And then at some point, Quip will be on. We have to start planning that, though. So.
Yeah, let's get Quip going.
Well, we've had him on Retro Cavalcade, so it's
I've seen him there. I saw him on Punks the other day.
Yeah,
of course on GDL, and I love it. I love to see it.
Yeah, And it's always nice when there's a new co-host and it's not a Shemp situation. It's an actual like like Quip isn't like he's like he's like what it's like Coach and Woody on Cheers rather than Diane and Kirstie Alley.
I love it, Shemp. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Anyway, on that note, we're gonna head out so Brick can go destroy the internet with his awesomeness. Follow Brick
Oh, Jeebus.
to all the channels. It's like on NBC when there would be that night of crossovers.
I can't peace symbol, but yes, peace, whatever.
Oh.
Yeah, come through.
Yep. And on that note, we will see you all in the next one. And in a world, wait, come with me while we leave this live stream. Oh my God.
Like, oh my God, come with me on
Come
this
with
journey.
me on this